Greetings. Greetings, everyone. This is IyapoNgina, also known as Cassandra-Floyd, also known as the Road Black Girl. And I am here today to continue a reading I started last night. So for those who've been tuning in, I have been reading The Great Cosmic Mother, Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth by Monica Zhu and Barbara Moore for a couple months now. And so I've just been going chapter by chapter, which I will continue doing after this particular reading. But last night, given the events of the last few days, the infamous leak of the intention of the Supreme Court to overturn Roe versus Wade, I thought it was important for me to skip ahead a little bit. So just to give you some background, you're going to have to excuse my voice because I've been kind of the last couple of days. But just to give some background about what I'm reading and why I'm reading it. Today I am reading, hey Frank. So today I am reading chapter 49. The last chapter I started, or the last chapter I left off at was 39. But I'm skipping ahead because this book was written in 1987. Okay? The book is dope. I've read it this is my fourth time reading the book. This is my second time reading the book live. And for this book to have been written in 1987, the book began being drafted in 1983. It is so currently relevant that it borders on spooky. It borders on clairvoyant. And so I started reading last night the chapter called The Machine. It is a very, very long chapter. So I only read part of the chapter. I'm going to pick up reading where I left off last night. But just to kind of give a brief recap about what I read last night, the machine, she is talking about what the machine is, what its origins are, and what continues to feed the machine. So I'm not going to go back and read it. You can go back into my YouTube channel, which is IyapoNgina, IyapoNgina, IyapoNgina. And but she starts the chapter by saying that, you know, these connected phenomena that are happening all around us that give rise to this thing that we're looking at. Now, I'm talking in current day, but she's talking in 1987, is the church and other religious institutions, and she names them: Judaism, Islam, Christianity, Hinduism, and Buddhism as the primary ones. So the church and other religious institutions, their collusion with corporations and military-dominated governments. That's it. And so you see here in my notes, I have, you see here, my shaky screen. You see here in my notes, I've drawn it out as a, oh shoot, my bad. In my notes, I've drawn it out as this wicked triangle of collusion. You see the church, the corporatocracy, and these military state governments, right? America is included. America is not excluded. Have me tell it, it's the chief of those military state governments. Okay, so what I read last night was gangster, so I would encourage you to go back and listen to that. But I am going to continue where we left off last night. So for those just tuning in, again, what I'm reading today is from The Great Cosmic Mother, Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth, on the chapter The Machine. The wreckage, it is produced. I'll read the last sentence that I read from last night, and then go into the next portion. The totally colonized man, colonized by priestly ideology, is thus appeased by giving him the female to colonize, and his potentially revolutionary energy, is thus turned into repressive hostility against woman, against his other half, against his mate, against his mother, against his holistic self. And this is how the divine homosexual family of the patriarchal priesthoods maintains its power, an erroneous and seemingly endless power. The wreckage it has produced is all around us today, the results of generations of male hostility to the female, still manipulated and orchestrated by holy men of all patriarchal systems, reproduction-oriented sex, prohibition of birth control, the demonization of female sexual pleasure and autonomy, the inculcation of lifelong guilt and perpetual fear surrounding the fact of sex itself. We know all this has done nothing to improve the relationship of woman and man, or of woman and woman, or of man and man. On the contrary, it has, in William Reich's accurate perception, created a bitterly deformed and deprived, repressed machinery which functions as the mechanical, pathological energy source for all larger human conflicts. And where's my pen at? Anyway, they are larger only in the sense that they are the magnification of each man's sexual ontological pain and rage into global proportions. Perpetual seething rage and continuous violence, a world always and always at war. Is the inevitable result when men are told over and over from the beginning of their consciousness that the very source of their being is evil. Oh, Lord, where am I? Can you bring me an 8-pen, please? That the very source of their being is evil. Let's see. This is certainly a source of so much male aggression, while women must be the evil, embody it within. Thank you. Excuse me. Let's see. This is certainly a source of so much male aggression, while women must be the evil, embody it within, and this is certainly a source of so much female depression. For male and female life roles in patriarchal culture are structured on the belief in this ontological evil and its embodiment in our sexual selves. In the bedroom, in the home, in the neighborhood, in the city, in the nation, in the world, all human relationships have been in some way warped and devastated by the predictable mutual hostility, grinding antagonism, fear and guilt, vicious resentment and retribution between the sexes that must result when human beings are told that God wants them to behave in their beds like breeding cattle. The lingering sour and stiff lineaments of ungratified desire that must result when both sexes are yoked together in a grim beast of burden union called sanctified marriage. Come on. Functioning as pious, non-ecstatic cattle to reproduce herd congregations for God and the Holy Church. Except the true beasts are innocent. They do not know what they do, nor what they are deprived of, nor what they suffer from, the deprivation. Equally inevitable in such a world are periodic eruptions into what Pope John Paul II called our present day hedonism, a sexual compulsiveness so characteristic of patriarchal, a sexual compulsiveness that occurs also automatically in reaction to the anti-sexual compulsiveness so characteristic of patriarchal culture. The Vatican sees the rise in abortion or in women's demands for abortion as a sign of Western hedonism. Come on, y'all. We're talking about 1987, but here we are yet again. Let's see. The Vatican sees the rise in abortion or in women's demands for abortion as a sign of Western hedonism, a material self-indulgence, a wallowing in fleshly existence, and a forgetting of the spirit. More abortions occur today, certainly, because abortions have been made legal, partially legal, or safer. This does not necessarily mean the demand or need for abortions have increased. They have just become more visible. Some non-fundamentalist Christians are opposed to abortion primarily because they see that other preventative birth control measures are available and do not like to see surgical abortions used as a substitute for responsible birth control. No one does. But surely these thoughtful people must also understand that generation after generation of women raised in patriarchal cultures that have kept us systematically ignorant of our sexual and productive processes leaves its dark mark. Throughout Christendom, the ancient herbal contraceptives, the pagan body knowledge, the folklore and customs of non-reproductive sex, once passed on from mother to daughter, were destroyed with the holy fires, and driven so far underground, few Western women have ever again had access to them. With all of our clinical technical knowledge of female sex and reproduction today, most teenage pregnancies occur among girls who never knew, were never taught how their bodies work or how to engage in sex without becoming pregnant. They do not know. They do not know because their parents, their churches, their cultures still assume that ignorance equals prevention, i.e., knowledge equals sin. And this, despite all the overwhelming statistics to the contrary. But the Vatican's position and the fundamentalist patriarchal position generally is opposed to all birth control, to preventative mechanical and chemical contraception, as well as abortion. In this opposition, the Catholic Church and the fundamentalist sects reveal their desire to control human sexuality by dogmatically limiting occurrence to potentially reproductive acts only. Anything else is a sin, i.e., not dominated by guilt, or the actual consequence of pregnancy. In this continued insistence that non-reproductive sex is hedonistic and that legal abortion or contraception of any kind will only encourage and increase this hedonism, the Pope is repeating the celibate clergy's long indulged myopic illusion that only single women need abortions or birth control, i.e., that the demand for contraception and abortion is being made only by a lot of loose, lascivious single women seeking to enjoy sex outside of marriage. Is it myopic illusion or an intentional distortion? Surely the priesthood must know something of the 1,000-year history of married women within its own church. Surely the Vatican must know that throughout Christian, including Catholic history, women have always had abortions or have tried every bizarre means thinkable to prevent pregnancies or end them. But of course, they frequently risked death in doing so. Or the contraception or abortion failed and they died in childbirth. Or they survived childbirth and watched their children starve to death. Or they saw children grow to youth and then die as cannon fodder or rape victims or breeders for ruling and collusive church-state wars. Or they all died together of mass plagues exacerbated by the church's prohibitions on basic hygienic knowledge and witch medicine. Or surely the church knows the common history of enormous numbers of women forced to live as breed cows under the pious folds of its own male skirts. Or how, to avoid pregnancy at all costs, they refused sex and were beaten into submission or death by their husbands with the church's blessing. Come on, y'all. Shit. We search the Vatican's long history and find nowhere any faint expression of shock or outrage over this 1,000-year-long saga of human wretchedness and abuse within the sacrament of Christian marriage. And we are forced to conclude, for one thing, that it is not contraception or abortion per se that the church opposes. What the Vatican and all fundamentalist priesthoods oppose is sex without punishment for women. Y'all ain't heard. What the Vatican and all fundamentalist priesthoods oppose is sex without punishment for women. Pregnancy is considered a divinely sufficient punishment for sex in the eyes of the church. Contraception and abortion are opposed because they allow a woman to escape punishment. Oh my God. Whew. Let's see. Contraception and abortion are opposed because they allow a woman to escape punishment, to have sex and get off scot-free. But in the old days, at least, the days of witch hunting and ignorance, contraception and especially abortion could be dangerous and life-threatening. If a woman saw abortion and died, well then, she was sufficiently punished too. Pregnancy or lethal abortion, it didn't matter, just so that the woman was sufficiently punished for having sex. The problem today, excuse me, I'm like purging. Don't be grossed out, so sorry. But anyway, the problem today, and the reason the Pope is bemoaning mass hedonism, is that birth control, and in particular modern abortion, have been made relatively safe. It is possible for a woman to have sex and go free, relatively. It is possible for a woman to consider the possibility of enjoying sexual pleasure without facing punishment. And when this happens, women become women again. Men might even have to become men again. We might all have to become our whole selves. And lo, the patriarchal priesthood faces a loss of employment. Come on, girl. For its hierarchic power over sexual humanity has always been in inverse proportion to the powerlessness of women and men over their own sexual lives. This is to say that there is no other choice. Either we live with sexual autonomy or we live under sexual fascism. This is we, men and women, suffer from this madness. Sexual fascism is a condition under which a sexual energy is sublimated for us by the automatic machinery of piety and drudgery, a machinery set in motion by the ruling elite to co-opt human biological energy and to use it to run its palaces and mansions, its gorgeous religious mausoleums, to provide it with the diversionary luxuries and wars, while a large revolutionary mass of exploited people is kept in a manipulatable condition of productive repression. The machinery of sexual fascism excuse me, has been running the world for 3,000 or 4,000 years. And for just as long, the patriarchal priesthoods have been oiling and blessing its terrible gears. they turn at their most hideous under the love beds of every woman and man on earth until female sexual autonomy is achieved. They will continue to turn, even in the most liberated atmospheres inside the hearts and brains and the genitals of all of us. No one escapes unless everyone becomes free. That is how the machinery works. Excuse me. That's how the machinery works, babe. I really wanted to wait until I was done clearing all of my sickness, but this couldn't wait, obviously. Okay. In today's world, thousands of children will starve to death every day. Millions more suffer the kind of malnutrition that permanently damages brain and the body. The priests of the world's major patriarchal religions, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, and Judaism, do not consider this situation particularly moral, but they do not consider it abnormal either. The poor are always with us. That's a quote. Life is hell, etc. The situation just seems to illustrate these priesthoods' biophobic case. In their ontological world hatred and doctrinal nihilism, the holy men try to persuade us, and no doubt themselves, that suffering is the eternal and definitive human condition. And the daily starvation of children is just one more sad but inescapable example of our moral condition, of fleshly sin and corruption, of samsara, the sorrow and impurity of the world, of life on the wheel of Buddhistic illusion. Male priesthoods of patriarchal religions, all of whom live in the maximum comfort and even luxury their cultures can afford, have been rationalizing the suffering of others for so long. Throughout 4,000 years of unctuous droning, no doubt they've come to believe their own words for want of hearing anything else. 1 million infants die each year of starvation and malnutrition. In India, this is considered life by Hindu. This is considered life by the Hindu holy men, who preach that all of life is just illusion anyway. But if this year 1 million holy men died of starvation in India, you may be sure that we would hear something about it beyond the usual samsaric drone. 1 million starved babies a year does not make headlines. 1 million starved holy men probably would. But of course, eternal suffering is not the lot of the world's holy men, and never or rarely has it been. Eternal suffering is rather their property, their thing, their device, as it were, which allows them to retain employment as representatives of an all-powerful male God who just doesn't somehow seem able to help solve any of these problems. The priests blame the problems on life, on humanity. They thus handily explain all of this injustice and imbalance while maintaining themselves in comfort as their beneficiaries. As holy men for whom life's eternal suffering is a possession, they don't like blasphemous interference or challenge, especially from women. In the patriarchal piety, the only women who are rewarded, loved, or sainted are women like Mother Teresa, who succor the problem. Women who move to solve the problem are hated and cursed, or worse. For example, in 1984, Kuwaiti feminist Dr. Noura Al-Falah, a sociologist at Kuwait University, was fired from her job and imprisoned for the crime of lecturing on women under patriarchal religion. She analyzed and encouraged her students to analyze the position of women in Islam, Judaism, Christianity, and Greek philosophy. For this, she was charged by her government with questioning the existence of God and anti-Islamic activity. This is one of those governments beloved by the fundamentalists in which God is at the center. Dr. Al-Falah is now awaiting execution for her crimes. This was in 1984. This book was in 97, written in 97. The truth is, this much suffering, this much world suffering of starvation and degradation and brutality and poverty is neither normal nor natural, nor ontologically given. No normal living human female in a normal life situation keeps having children year after year just to watch half of them die before the age of 12. Women normally, and for most of human life on earth, give birth to one child at a time. This is what distinguishes Homo sapiens from most mammals, except the higher primates and cetaceans. And with intense and exclusive maternal care, including nursing for 3 to 6 years, the mother concentrates on raising that one child to a healthy level of independent development before she has another baby. Among all primitive primal people, this is a normal practice. Even primates nurse one baby for 3 to 6 years before becoming pregnant again. Even apes. No chimpanzee or gorilla mother is forced into bearing one baby a year, year after year. It just isn't done. Nor is it done anywhere where human females have healthy control over their own reproduction. The problem of mass poverty, mass starvation, the mass deaths of children and infants every year from a simple lack of proper nutrition, it is not normal, it is not life, nor is it the fault of human sin or sex or of women. It is a condition traceable solely and specifically to patriarchal religion, to patriarchal religion's 4,000 years of fascistic control over female reproduction. The problem cannot be solved, will not be solved short of mass annihilation until and unless women regain complete sexual autonomy. And this means the priest and holy men must give up their unwholesome urges to possess and to explain human suffering, rather than to end it. They must also give up their nasty and peculiar urges to control and manipulate human genitalia and reproductive organs as holy men rather than as of lovers. This too, in a normal world, just is not done. The anti-abortion movement in America calls itself pro-life. In fact, it is pro-fetus, period. Championing a fetus is easy. The mother's body is doing all the work. What is hard is to change the world so that millions and millions of children have a chance for some kind of qualitative life after they are born. This is the only genuine pro-life work. Come on. Come on. This is the only genuine pro-life work. If the anti-abortion movement presented a consistent pro-life gestalt in the whole range of their political and religious beliefs, then they would be presenting an ethical position worthy of respect, if not agreement. But this is not the case. The overwhelming majority of white Christian American pro-lifers display consistently biophobic voting records. Hawkish on war, supportive of every Pentagon budget, supportive of nuclear proliferation, pro-cruise in Europe. They are marked by a flag-waving, Bible-toting, political religious hostility to any idea of peaceful coexistence with the Soviet Union, with Cuba, with Nicaragua. They tend to oppose negotiation for life with any government they consider demonic, i.e. leftist. But one cannot be pro-holy war and pro-life at the same time. The terms cancel each other out, especially in a nuclear world. In domestic areas, the anti-abortionists are consistently and militantly opposed to all social welfare programs that allow children after birth to receive decent nutrition, medical care, shelter, and education, or even a dream of social and economic equity when they grow up. Most anti-abortionists, led by Ronald Reagan, are even on record in opposition to programs like WIC, which try to provide minimal nutritional and medical care for poor pregnant women. In February of 1985, the Physicians Task Force on Hunger in America announced that hunger, chronic malnutrition, and undernourishment has reached epidemic proportions in America. But the most visible anti-abortionists aligned themselves on the side of a president, an administration, and a mindset that has publicly stated that allegations of rampant hunger simply cannot be documented, and which has pointed to the existence of very tall very tall black basketball players and fat welfare mothers, i.e., women who live on cheap starch and lard, as evidence that no one is badly fed in America. In 1983, in Detroit, Michigan, with depression-led unemployment and the automobile factories combined with massive state and federal cutbacks in food and medical assistance programs, the Public Health Department announced that infant mortality rates in some sections of the city had reached levels comparable to the infant death rate in Honduras, which is one of the poorest countries in Central America. Furthermore, there has been an epidemic rise in childhood cancer. Once rare, it is now the second major cause of death among young children, with 6,000 new cases reported each year in America. And the rise is attributable primarily to chemical pollution of the environment. But all government funding for research into children's vulnerability to environmental contamination, research that was began under the Carter administration, was cut off totally by the Reagan administration. The most visible politicians involved in the anti-abortion movement have, in their voting records, supported all such budget cuts. Are the pro-lifers out ranting and rallying to get these budget cuts restored? No. This is not to say that abortion is the answer to all our problems of malnutrition, malregulation of industry, and the maldistribution of wealth and resources. The argument is simply that to be righteously supportive of a fetus's full term within the womb and then entirely abandon it after it is born is ludicrous. When one reads the total gestalt of the anti-abortionist movement in America, it is clear to see that the average pro-lifer is not pro-life at all. Come on. Shout out to amen if you heard what I just said. When one reads the total gestalt of the anti-abortionist movement in America, it is clear to see that the average pro-lifer is not pro-life at all. Certainly not pro-quality of life. Rather, they are pro-control. Their obsession is the old Bronze Age fundamentalist patriarchal obsession to control female sex and reproduction. Pro-life men in particular, like those who firebomb abortion clinics for the glory of God, reveal their pastoralist belief that human life derives from the divine male sperm and that the human female is simply a vessel containing this life for God. In her research into the motivations of pro-life women, Faye Ginsburg, in her essay, The Body Politic, The Defense of Sexual Restriction by Anti-Abortion Activists, found a more sophisticated and secular complex of reasons. Anti-abortion women activists tend to feel that abortion rights are a key part of a whole feminist agenda that threatens their vocation as housewives and mothers. In a patriarchal culture that gives women few chances for employment in interesting careers or just well-paid jobs, the vocation of white middle class housewife is definitely an attractive occupation. Oh shit. Oh my God. Listen to what I just said, y'all. Okay? The reason anti-abortion women activists tend to feel that abortion rights are a key part of a whole feminist agenda that threatens their vocation as housewives and as mothers. In a patriarchal culture that gives women few chances for employment in interesting careers or just well-paid jobs, the vocation of the white middle-class housewife is definitely an attractive occupation. Most of us, if we are honest and have experienced a lot of the alternatives, can sympathize with these women's desires to hold on to their domestic roles and to the mystique of these roles. But it must be pointed out that this motivation has nothing to do with the fetus at all, or with the problems of poor women, single mothers, or working women. It is a motivation of understandable but limited self-interest. Further, it compounds the incorrect perception that motherhood and marriage are always synonymous, and that the abortion problem would be solved if all these single, loose, lascivious women would just stop having sex or just get married. The problem is not, nor has it ever been, this simple. Finally, no matter how deeply devoted anti-abortion women activists might be to their homes and to their domestic well-being, they have never, as a group, been able to wrest enough political power away from their right-wing husbands to ensure, via adequate, compassionate funding, the healthy and happy home life, nourishment, healthcare, education, and general well-being of all of those other women's fetuses after they are born. The concern for the fetus alone is a blind, if not hypocritical, sentiment, easy to indulge in because it requires nothing. It demands nothing of the person indulging in such a sentiment. The concern The concern for the entire human life following birth is a genuine human passion because it requires everything. It demands everything from us. Pro-life must mean more than an obsession with fetuses rolling down an assembly line of passive maternal flesh. It must mean a commitment to changing the world so that every child who enters it enters a place worth living in, i.e., it means that every righteous anti-abortionist on earth must put his or her money, time, and thought where his or her mouth is currently working all alone. In the words of the Southeast poet Will Inman, quote, where are those who call abortion murder? Where do they hide the milk? How do they spend their money? What do they plant in the mouths of their young? End quote. Perhaps the hardest part of the abortion issue for women, as well as for men to deal with is a point that is never raised or discussed thoroughly. A woman's right to make life and death decisions. Certainly, we live in a world in which a relative handful of ruling military, business, and political people wield life and death decision-making power over all of us and over the entire continuing life of Earth all of the time. They have allocated to themselves such an awesome power with our permission. At any moment, they can make the decision to obliterate us with nuclear missiles, sicken and destroy us with various kinds of chemicals and nerve gases, drag us off to concentration camps or torture chambers, yes, even in America, force us or our children into armies, send our sons, perhaps our daughters, off to death and mutilation and any number of dubiously necessary world conflicts. Certainly, we don't like this situation, but we live with it every single day. Under 4,000 years of patriarchal conditioning, we have come to accept it is normal or a given that any number of selected groups of men should hold absolute life and death power over our lives and over the lives of our children, at least in certain designated situations, the situations defined and designated by men. We have also given power to a larger number of people, than we care to think about, to make decisions affecting the issues of diminished life and slow death for many, many people, including ourselves. These are issues of environmental pollution, industrial safety, chemicals in our foods, the whole universe of imperfectly tested medications and drugs. At this moment, someone somewhere can be making a decision about putting something into the air, the water, the food chain, the school building, the automobile upholstery that somewhere down the line, 20 years from now, will kill us or kill a child or someone else we value and love. We all know such decisions are being made every day by decent, anonymous people. We prefer not to think about it, but this does not stop the decisions from being made. For women, the issue of life and death decision-making power in someone else's hands is even more quotidian. Everywhere women go in this world, the male sex holds power of life and death over us. Men can beat us, rape us, cage us in their loony bins and torture labs, force us into demeaning and life-endangering labor, sweatshop labor, factory work, street prostitution, childbearing, or illegal abortion. In exchange for our, let's see, I'm gonna read that sentence over again. Everywhere women go in this world, the male sex holds the power of life and death over us. Men can beat us, rape us, cage us in their loony bins and torture labs, force us into demeaning and life-endangering labor, sweatshop labor, factory labor, street prostitution, childbearing, or illegal abortion, in exchange for our daily bread or the lives of our living children. The life and death power of the male sex over the female sex has become such a substructure of every moment, act, and fact of our lives, it has come to seem normal to many people. Are men gods? No. But they have, over 4 millennia of male domination, allocated themselves to such godlike powers over us. Men rarely question their right to wield these powers. They believe it does come from God, their version of God. In fact, the exclusive male right to decide life and death defines patriarchal power. The army of God, anti-abortionist men who wave the Bibles in the faces of pregnant women going into clinics to have abortions. The fundamentalist men who talk so much about God's law in regard to female reproductive choice are the same men who would agree absolutely with the absolute power given to biblical patriarchs by God over the lives of their families. The kind of divinely mandated power that gave Hebrew fathers the right to stone their daughters to death if they were suspected of being non-virgins before marriage. The daughters' mothers had no say in the matter. She just had to stand by and watch her daughter being stoned to death for the great crime of having a non-intact hymen, perhaps a condition occurring, doctors tell us, in about 50% of the female population by mere accident. The God-fearing men who are so concerned with the fetus happen to believe in the God who gave fathers the right to kill their living children at any time if they were considered disobedient or corrupt. Is this the same God who forbids a woman to abort a fetus? Yes, it is. because the biblical God and the fundamentalist men who wave his holy book under the noses of pro-abortion women are not involved in a religion of life, but in a religion of male control. Fundamental to this religion is this control, is a male's fundamental to this religion and this control is a male's exclusive right to make life and death decisions. Abortion represents woman's right to make such decisions. And the fundamentalist men cannot bear the thought of sharing such ontological power with women. They oppose abortions not because they care mightily about the fetus. By their historic record, they show they never have. But they do care mightily about retaining this exclusive male power over life and death, for it is this power which keeps them in power. And it must be pointed out that under historic patriarchy, women's non-possession of such ontological life and death power, life and death decision-making power, has done nothing to counteract men's possession and use of such power, i.e., our harmlessness has not kept them from doing us harm. On the historical scale of the past 4,000 bloody years, our meekness has not influenced him to be meek, but has often, on the contrary, provoked him to greater violence. It is that revenge against the feminine hermeticism, that masculine desperate attempt to obtain a response from a body we feel is insensible, that Octavia Paz speaks of, that religious female humility and non-action against which macho sadism seems compelled to beat its fist. But it isn't only men who are terrified by the possibility of women regaining our ontological life and death decision-making powers. Women fear it intensely. Women fear it intensely, and for good reason. Ontological power equals ontological responsibility. A woman who is totally conscious that she is making a life and death decision for which she alone is cosmically answerable, such a woman can never be a little girl again. Never again, daddy's good little girl, or God's sweet little angel, or all the rest of these situational epithets designed to inculcate in females a chronic state of cosmic non-responsibility, i.e., of personal non-attention to or avoidance of our universal life and death resonance and holistic repercussion of the effects of her choices. I.e., she can never be a non-thinking human again. And this is what the world needs from women. Oh. This is what the world needs of women. A lot of hard, ontological life and death thinking that is neither distracted nor discouraged nor beaten down by 4,000 years worth of male God sermonizing about what life is, what God is, what woman is, what man is, what it's all supposed to be about in this pre-programmed, prefabricated, prearranged, and preposterous patriarchal chapter and verse propaganda script, which everyone has followed for far too long as Holy Writ. As Paul Virilio points out in Pure War, women have been patted on the head and patronizingly absolved of life and death thinking for generations. The big man, the father, the husband, the priest, the boss, the king, the president, the military leader, takes heavy, bloody, scary life and death celebration out of our hands and says, "Here, darling, let me do that for you." And now, at last, at the possible end of all that is, of humanity, we see where this leads. If it is not to listen to what I'm telling you right now, okay? Peel your ears open. If it is not too late for all of us, if it is not to be too late for all of us, all women on a global scale have to regain our ancient ontological power and intuitive skill for making life and death decisions. For they are always linked. Life and death are always linked. To decide at the root about life and about what life is and could be, women must also know how to decide at the root about death and about what death is for, what death means to life. Millions of women worldwide thrown into life and death situations of warfare, torture, mass rape, political slavery, and all the rest. Millions of third world women and the minority women in the United States also, Black and Chicano, Native American, and Asian, have grown up being forced to make and live with heavy ontological life and death decisions. This is what the more sheltered average white American woman perceives as their strength. It is strength, the often bitterly won authority of being utterly alone and responsible at the very root of things, life and death, always twining around each other like poisonous snakes, who are also lovers. All women, and maybe the highly sheltered average white American woman most of all, must begin the daily practice of wrestling with these twined serpents. For that is how the ontological muscles are developed. That is how the sexual and spiritual powers are intertwined. That is how females regain evolutionary memory, the evolutionary memory and habit of being cosmic women once again, i.e., that is how God re-becomes female. Woo! As women cease being passive vessels of the divine male sperm, we cease being passive vessels of male ideology, including the patriarchal priesthood's image of God. And this is probably the ultimate challenge to the Christian church and to all the patriarchal religions which depend for their existence on the passive receptacleness of women as handmaidens to male activity, as mothers who are relied on to inculcate the received male image into the brains of their children's brains and nervous systems, as fertile proliferators of crowded and repressed or rich and repressive congregations. This is the real challenge presented by feminist issues, including abortion's rights, to the fundamentalist religions and to the liberal ones as well. Female sexual autonomy equals female mental autonomy, and both together add up to female spiritual autonomy. When women begin to define our own lives, including being ontologically responsible for each life we choose to bring or not to bring into the world, then women will become fully functioning definers of the world. And then we will be fully responsible for the kind of world, the spiritual and physical quality of world into which we bring new life. And this undoubtedly is the root fear of patriarchal religions and their priesthoods and devoted followers, that someday half of the world's population will get up off its knees and throw down the mops and the prayer beads and the whole dreary catechism of subliminally mumbled words and just walk out of the house of God for good, leaving no one to mop the floor. And walking out into a larger world that is so inherently spiritual in its own right, just as it is, evolutionarily perceived by new eyes, clear at last. It will need no priests, no preachers, or prefabricated holy scripts to define or explain itself to us. The world and its life will then become self-evident, just as the entire living universe is self-evident. And how could it be otherwise to itself? And if we are here at all, we are here as organic parts of itself. And the man and woman will be as gods are grains of sand tumbled by the night sea, or dust balls rolling over the church floor. And the patriarchal priesthoods will be left alone with this, to mop their own damn floors. Okay? That's where I'm gonna stop today. Yes. So I know it was a lot. is game changing in every possible way. But that's the problem. I just had this conversation today. I will digress for a minute and then I'll leave y'all alone because we're going to pick back up tomorrow. Because like I said, this chapter is probably the longest chapter in the book. I think we still have about 15 more pages in this chapter. But the conversation I just had today with a friend of mine on a different subject, but it's still the same conclusion, is that at the root of all things, which is what this portion of the chapter was just talking about, is it is a terrifying idea. It is a terrifying concept to us. Those of us who even through slavery and oppression have been, quote, taken care of by our masters, have been provided for by our masters. And the idea of having to take personal responsibility for all that is, to have to take personal responsibility for the way the world looks, is a scary thing. Even for those of us who think we're progressive or activist, if you will, which was why this conversation happened today. It is so much easier to beat our chest, stomp our feet, and raise our fist to this mysterious, ambiguous, faceless, ominous bad guy like the state, right? Or like, the corporatocracy, or whatever, the government, what have you. It is much easier to get out in the streets by the tens of thousands, chanting and clapping and raising our fists and fighting the police, thinking that we are engaging this big, bad, ambiguous bad guy. What is much more difficult is to recognize our role in its maintenance and do the work daily in our personal lives necessary to dismantle the shit. That's the hard question, because now it challenges us to take. That's why we've always been let off. We've always been relieved of our personal responsibility. That's what she's talking about. Is how women have been relieved of their responsibility of making life and death decisions. You see, the people have been relinquished of their ability to make. We'll do the dirty work for you. We'll do all the bad work for you. You just go to work every day and just pay your taxes. Just do what you're supposed to. Don't worry about this hard political stuff. You see, we got it. All you got to do is show up a couple of times, every 4 years, make your little vote, and we'll do the heavy lifting. What it does is absolve us from our responsibility for how the shit looks. Each individual role that we play in how the world looks. Our continued participation in it, guaranteeing the maintenance of it, even as we chant, even as we fighting out here and not doing the kind of work that is our responsibility to do behind closed doors to ensure its destruction, to ensure its end. See, that's the harder thing to do. So, this chapter is not just about abortion. It's not just about it's not just about the true nature of why this is even an issue, right? The nature is not about the protection of life or the sanctity of life, because the people who own and rule us don't give a fuck about life at all. That's evidence. The same motherfuckers talking about being pro-lifers will mow people down and not think twice about it. So the question has never been a pro-life question. The question is about control. And if you go back to the chapter that I read, which was heavy hitting shit that most of y'all don't want to hear, like, men, I've been bitching about it for the last 3 months. You cannot be allies. You have to be accomplices. Whatever impacts and affects the life of women directly, not indirectly, directly impacts your life, your humanity, your sanity, your ability to be sovereign. And for you to look at what happens to half the fucking planet as something outside yourself is what the state relies on in you. So your suffering, the stripping away of your own humanity, the stripping away of your humanity is partly caused by your complicity in the oppression of women. So even if you ain't the bad guy who beats the shit out of a woman, your complicity. You got homies that you know doing dirt behind closed doors, and you don't grab them up by their collar and check the shit out of them and attempt to lead them in right way, in right direction. You too are complicit in the maintenance of this madness that impacts the life of everybody on earth. So what does that mean? You know, you hear this bullshit of, well, what can one person do? That in and of itself is the question, because we can do everything. We can do everything. We have all of the creative potential of the entire universe, of God itself. We can literally have an idea that seemingly comes from nowhere, and it comes from somewhere, seemingly comes from nowhere, and take an abstraction and it become a material force in the world. But somehow we do not see our individual potential when it comes to saving the world, when it comes to changing the world, when it comes to undoing this madness that's been imposed on humanity for thousands of years now. We do have a responsibility. So I'm going to end the meeting. I'm going to end the reading today with that. I'll pick it back up tomorrow. And for those who might have turned in late or will tune in later, I am reading from The Great Cosmic Mother, Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth by Monica Zhu and Barbara Moore. I am reading from the chapter called The Machine, which is chapter 49. If you have the book, it begins on page 358, I believe. But follow along with me because, honey, we are seeing in real time. Y'all need to go back to the little YouTube videos that I've done on America's First Pluto Returns, on the fact that this Pluto, I'm probably going to have to do a whole different video on the fact that Pluto just stationed retrograde on Friday, and 2 days later, we getting a leak about the Supreme Court's intention to overturn Roe versus Wade. That is classic Plutonian energy, right? Is that shit done in secret behind closed doors, getting leaked? That's classic Plutonian shit. A lot of classic Plutonian shit happening right now. In the epic of these 2 years of America's first Pluto returns, which we will not transition out of until November 2024. I've been saying for months and months and months now that if we're going to change the world, it's going to happen in these 2 years. One of two things is going to happen. Either we going to radically evolve in the next 2 years or set the shit off to evolve in the next 2 years, or we are going to condemn the world and our descendants to another 250 years of this madness. That's it. It's the only choices that we have. That's it. Every action that we are involved in, everything that we do is going to give rise to the new world. Every word we speak is going to create the new world. And what are you focused in on? What are you doing? Because I can guarantee you this shit that we're experiencing is because those in power are well aware of the impact of this period in human history, and they are making every stride possible to maintain hegemony over the fucking planet. What are you doing in contrast? How are we moving in contrast? What are we doing to ensure that humanity can be something worth experiencing, worth incarnating into? So I'm going to close with that. I will be back tomorrow, probably around the same time, to hopefully finish reading the chapter called The Machine. Until then, I want to say thank you all for tuning in. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel, which is IyapoNgina. That's IYAPO, last name NGINA. Like, subscribe, and share this information. This is not for entertainment purposes, baby. This is world-changing shit that I'm trying to impart on you. We have decisions to make about what kind of mark we're going to leave on the planet. That's it. This is the world. This is the mission. This is what this period in this is what we all fucking incarnated for, whether you realize it or not. If you've grown and you're conscious and you're a thinking human being, this is the reason that you called on heaven to identify a mother that would put you in the situation that you was in, to be a thinking, conscious, spiritual human being at this epic moment in human history. Because these next 2 years is going to set the term for the next 250 years definitively, and potentially for thousands of years to come. So you need to be making plans about the impact that you intend on having in this planet, in this life, in this incarnation, because it is a blessing to be alive right now. It is the most exciting time in human history to be alive right now. It is. I don't give a fuck what nobody talking about in this media. I don't give a fuck what these goddamn news headlines is. We have been handed the most epic cosmic gift ever in humanity, and we have to seize it. We have to seize it, and we have to see it as a blessing. We have to see it as like the greatest. It's like winning the fucking lottery out this bitch. It's like winning the goddamn lottery. That is what being alive right now is, like winning the goddamn lottery. This is the time that we chose to incarnate. This is the time that we are alive. This is the impact that our presence on the planet can have on the rest of the human epic. So, with that being said, IyapoNgina, also known as Cassandra-Floyd, also known as the Rogue Black Girl. I will see you again tomorrow with the continued reading of the Great Cosmic Mother, Rediscovering the Religion of the Earth, on the chapter, The Machine. Peace.